Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 18th of Study With Me. European Union Law, this podcast helps you get ready for your university exams and gain a deeper understanding of the subject. We're jumping straight in with the notes you sent us on accession treaties. In this deep dive, we're going to really focus on their legal architecture. We want to make sure this material is clear and, memorable for your exams. So let's start with a really simple definition. What are we talking about here? Essentially, they're formal international agreements.
Right. They're signed between all the existing EU member states on one side and a candidate country on the other.
And their whole purpose is just to formalize that country's entry into the Union.
Exactly. But that
right.
simple definition is just the launch pad. The key question for any exam really is this. How do these treaties manage to be instruments of, let's say, political enlargement and legal evolution at the same time?
All while keeping the EU's legal integrity.
Precisely. And the whole answer is really rooted in their legal status, where they sit in the hierarchy.
Okay, so let's unpack that legal status. This is the big takeaway, right? The hierarchy. Why aren't these just, side agreements? What makes them so powerful?
Well, it's because they are explicitly included in the very notion of treaties under Article 49 of the Treaty on European Union. The TEU itself says so.
And that's not just an administrative point.
No, not at all. That single inclusion, that one detail, it instantly elevates accession treaties to the highest possible tier of the EU legal system.
Which is primary law.
Primary law.
The very top.
So just to be crystal clear for anyone listening, when we say primary law, we mean the big ones, the TEU, the TFE.
The Charter of Fundamental Rights.
Right, the general principles, and right there alongside them, with the exact same legal weight, are the accession treaties.
That's it. Article 1 of the TEU says the TEU and TFE have the same legal value, and by extension, so do these treaties. They aren't supplementary. They are, for all intents and purposes, amendments to the founding documents. Okay, so if they have the exact same rank as, say, the TFEU, what happens if there's a conflict? I mean, a perceived conflict between a rule in a new accession treaty and an older one in a founding treaty. How does the system handle that?
That's a great question. And it really gets to the constitutional nature of the EU. The European Court of Justice addressed this way back.
You're talking about the Lever case.
Yes, from 1986. The ECJ defined the treaties as the constitutional charter of a community based on the rule of law. So the EU isn't just another international body.
It has a constitution.
A constitutional charter, yes. And because accession treaties share that primary law rank, they are effectively constitutional amendments. They modify that foundational charter to bring new members into the fold.
The practical consequences of that must be immense. Being primary law means they stand above all secondary law, so regulations, directives, decisions, all of it.
All of it. And what's more, they are sources of law that can confer competences on the EU institutions and, crucially, can even grant rights and obligations directly to individuals.
Just like we saw in Van Ghent on Loos.
Exactly. Their legal effect is immediate, it's profound, and it cuts across all of EU law. So once we've established that an accession treaty is basically a constitutional amendment, the next logical step for exam success is to understand the process. How does the EU even create such a powerful document?
Right. And this procedure is incredibly rigorous. It starts years, maybe even decades, before anyone puts pen to paper on a treaty. It's a whole mechanism.
It is. And the first step, this is a key exam point, is establishing eligibility through the Copenhagen criteria.
Set back in 1993.
Yes. And they are absolutely non-negotiable. They cover 3 pillars. Political stability, democracy, rule of law, human rights.
Then the economic side, having a functioning market economy.
And finally, and this is huge, the administrative capacity to adopt the entire body of EU law.
So the criteria are the preconditions. But the real negotiation, step 2, is about that legal integration. It all centers on the acquis communautaire. What does that actually mean, adopting the entire acquis?
It means adopting the full body of existing EU law. And the scale of that is, well, it's staggering.
Yeah.
We're talking about roughly 80,000 pages of treaties, regulations, directives, case law.
Wow.
International agreements, everything. So the negotiations are fundamentally about acceptance, not about changing the rules.
It's not a negotiation in the sense of picking and choosing.
Not at all. The candidate has to show it can transpose, implement, and enforce every single piece of it. The only wiggle room is really in setting up temporary exceptions or transitional periods.
That really puts the scale of it into perspective. So after that massive legal alignment is done, we get to the final formalization, step 3. signing the treaty.
Correct. And it's signed by all of the existing member states, the EU institutions, and of course the acceding state. But then comes the part that really shows its legal weight. Step 4, ratification.
Yeah, this is crucial.
It is. Just like any major treaty revision under Article 48, the accession treaty has to be ratified by every single existing member state and by the acceding country.
And that often means they have to change their own domestic constitutions to make it happen.
Yes. So this mandatory unanimous ratification across, 27 or more national parliaments? I mean, that speaks volumes.
It legally cements the treaty's status. It confirms it's not just some agreement, it's a foundational constitutional change that needs total buy-in, politically and legally. Okay, so once this whole massive legal exercise is complete, the treaty enters into force. What does it actually change inside the EU system? What are the primary legal effects students should focus on?
You can really boil them down to mandatory treaty amendments that are all about smooth integration. I'd say there are two main areas, institutional adaptation and what we could call transitional discipline.
Let's start with institutional adaptation. I mean, it's logical. The family's getting bigger, so the house rules have to change.
That's a good way to put it. The treaties have to update the core structures, the ones detailed in the TEU and the TFEU. This means really concrete adjustments.
Like the number of MEPs.
Exactly. Setting the new total number of members of the European Parliament. And probably most critically, adjusting the voting weights in the Council of the European Union.
That council vote adjustment is absolutely key, isn't it? If the voting structure, especially for qualified majority voting, isn't recalculated perfectly,
The whole decision-making process could just grind to a halt.
or it could unfairly empower the new members.
Precisely. The institutional structure is a finely tuned machine. You can't just add new parts without recalibrating the whole balance of power. The accession treaty has to immediately specify the new QMV threshold.
And it also allocates a new seat on the commission for the new member state.
It does. It has to.
Okay, so beyond the institutional seats, what about those temporary exceptions you mentioned earlier? Students often find protocols a bit confusing. Why do these temporary rules need to have the full force of primary law equal to the TEU?
That is a fantastic question. Article 51 of the TEU confirms that protocols attached to the treaties are an integral part of them. They have the same legal value. And they're used specifically to manage the economic and legal shock of joining. For instance, they contain that transitional discipline we mentioned, like temporary restrictions on the free movement of workers or a phased-in approach to certain environmental standards.
Ah, I see. So if an accession treaty protocol says a new member can wait, say, 5 years before applying a specific EU directive, that protocol needs primary law status.
To legally override that directive.
Which is secondary law.
Exactly. It's an essential legal tool for a phased, managed integration. It gives the necessary legal force to those temporary measures, ensuring the existing body of law is respected, even while practical exceptions are made.
So to make all of this a bit more concrete, let's just run through how these treaties have shaped the Union over the years.
You can literally trace the EU's entire evolution through its enlargements, and each one was formalized by a specific accession treaty. It just reinforces their status as the consistent legal tool for expansion.
You had the first big one in 1973 that brought in the UK, Denmark, and Ireland, a huge expansion to the north and west.
And that required major adaptations, particularly on things like agriculture and trade policy. Then you have the Southern Enlargement, formalized by the 1986 Accession Treaty.
Spain and Portugal.
Yes, and that was critical for introducing what we now call cohesion policy, aimed at reducing economic gaps across the Union.
Then, of course, the big one, the landmark 2004 Central and Eastern European Enlargement, the Big Bang.
That was probably the most complex institutional challenge the EU has ever faced. Integrating 10 new member states at once required incredibly extensive treaty adaptation.
And the most recent example, of course, 2013, with the Accession Treaty for Croatia.
All these examples just clearly demonstrate that this is the consistent legal mechanism used for decades to manage expansion. It reinforces their status as this enduring instrument of primary law.
And what really stands out is that every single major shift in the EU's political map, every growth spurt, has been recorded and legitimized by a document that is fundamentally constitutional in rank.
And if you connect that to the bigger picture, it really highlights this unique tension in EU primary law. These are created as international agreements, but they operate internally as mandatory constitutional amendments.
They're the strongest possible commitment device.
They are.
So the main takeaway for your studies has to be this. Accession treaties are twin instruments. They enable political enlargement, and they legally amend the treaties, which confirms their status as being equal in legal value to the TEU and TFEU. Remember the whole process, from the Copenhagen criteria all the way to unanimous ratification.
And we'll leave you with a final thought to mull over. Consider this mandatory, difficult ratification process, needing unanimous consent in every single member state. Compare that to the simplified treaty revision procedures, like the Passerelle Clause in Article 48, which can bypass national ratification entirely. Does the comprehensive, incredibly difficult nature of the accession treaty process make it the strongest possible testament to the EU's commitment to legal certainty during expansion, precisely because it's so hard to achieve?